with any property, you don't charge too much where you don't have enough of an applicant pool to make the right decisions. And so obviously, making sure they meet your objective criteria, making sure they can consistently pay rent on time, it's going to really ease your anxiety in so many different ways.
Alrighty, folks, if you are watching this channel, there is no question that you are an everyday wealth builder. However, in order to become an everyday wealth builder, you can't lose money. You can't go broke. So we are going to talk about how landlords go broke, some of the mistakes that we have seen, some of the mistakes we may have made, and things you should not do. Dana, this is always fun. Ladies first, what's the first thing that you've seen landlords do to go broke?
Well, I want to start at the beginning when they purchase a property, because you look at the numbers on paper and it looks really good, but you don't factor in turnover costs that are going to be so much higher. The chances of default from a tenant are going to be higher, or the property, they look at the photos of the property and they say, wow, this place looks really nice. When actually in reality, you go there and you're like, there is so much maintenance and repair if you're physically there in person walking around, and the costs are too high. And that's where I find some kind of newer real estate investors will look at it on paper and say, look, the tenants pay me $900 in rent and my mortgage is only, $400. But the reality is there's going to be a lot of turnover costs, a lot of maintenance and repair. And that's going to just, 1, 2, 3 requests is going to wipe out your cash flow.
Yeah, I really love that you brought that one up first. It's exactly where I would start. There's so many people I talk to that maybe live in high cost of areas like California that build these spreadsheets about Ohio or Detroit or whatever. And it's like, folks, come on now. It's not that easy. Just because you have Excel math that says it's going to cash flow, it's just not there. And so many people get hurt, believing the Excel math. So I think that's a great place to start. I'll start at the beginning too. One of the things that I've seen and I wrote about in my book is you got to watch your debt structure, right? Putting in a debt structure, maybe with variable rate debt, or, date the rate or marry the house, date the rate, or, or some kind of adjustable rate mortgages. If you're betting on rates being lower in the future to make the numbers work, don't bother. Buy it better or move on, right? Because as people will learn, very quickly here in the multifamily space, the debt is what always blows up. The debt was the cause of the great financial crisis. The debt's going to be cause of these Class B and Class C buildings getting cut in half. So watch your debt. And again, that's not only a purchase. As I wrote about in my book, mine was a refi. I refied and took too much money out. And, I was losing $50 a month before expenses. And that's just stupid. So watch your debt.
Yeah, I love that one. And very quickly, just back to the first one that we had mentioned about the properties and, buying out of state. I also love to look at when was the property last purchased? Mm-hmm. How much was it purchased for? And now how much are they selling it? Because you'll see a lot of the fix and flippers will buy something in a terrible neighborhood. So they'll buy something and maybe they'll pay $20,000 for it. And they sell it to you. You look at it and you're like, it's beautiful. And look at the cash flow on it. And they sell it to you for $100,000. And you know that those renovations they're doing are, a lot cosmetic to make it look nice for you, California investor. And so I also like to look at that as well, just to see kind of what's the history on this property consistently. And is this what I'm purchasing it at? Does that make sense? All right. So then my next one on it is going to be on obviously the tenant screening side. And just really making sure that with any property, you don't charge too much where you don't have enough of an applicant pool to make the right decisions. And so obviously, making sure they meet your objective criteria, making sure they can consistently pay rent on time, it's going to really ease your anxiety in so many different ways.
Yeah, the next one I'll go to is I'll just go to the big elephant in the room, turnover, right? One of the things that most landlords, even if you get all this upfront stuff right, that can really make you go broke if you don't understand what turnover is in your market or for your asset type, right? If you have, for example, in my portfolio, we have some studio apartments, and let's just say the studio apartments turn over a lot faster than a 4-bedroom home.
Yeah.
right? If you're not budgeting for that turnover, and you could go broke. I mean, even if your Excel is right in an out of state market, but you get turnover every 12 months, you're probably going to go broke, because
Yeah.
again, that turnover cost is rough. So again, watch your turnover. Again, keep rents maybe below market. Do whatever you can to keep them there, because for a lot of landlords, even if you got the upfront stuff right, it's the turnover that can just take a great year bad. And yeah, so watch that turnover.
Yeah. And that's where really doing those inspections beforehand, I'm a huge fan of like making sure the tenant knows what the quality of the property should be when they move out, reminding them that it's only going to help them get their security deposit back if they're using professional move out cleaners, professional carpet cleaners. In certain cases, that's probably not something that you can do based on the property value. A lot of them will have the tenants do the cleaning, but just making sure that's the expectation set, because then you'll have reduce your vacancy a lot, because vacancy is my next one. You have the turnover costs, but as much as you can just reduce that vacancy, current tenant showing the property is a huge one, especially if they have it in great condition and they're incentivized to try to tell a tenant, I've lived here for 12 years. I've loved it. Whatever it is, to really help reduce that vacancy. Because I think a lot of landlords look at it and they're like, I'm going to charge $100 more. And it's like, yeah, but it's on market for an extra 30 days. So you just lost $3,000.
Exactly.
A lot more than the 12 months of rent at $100 less. And so doing that calculation, I think, is really important in reducing vacancy.
Yeah, I'll go one more, and I'll take this from Graham Stephan, right? Graham Stephan said many, many moons ago that one of the things that he did wrong is he didn't raise rents, right? Obviously, he was in Southern California, and his income was coming from elsewhere, but he never raised rents. And that's a way you can go broke as well, right? I mean, how many of us, myself included, have bought properties from landlords who owned them forever, and they were $500 under market.
Yeah.
Right. And that's another way you can go broke, especially in an environment where insurance is up and taxes are up and all these other costs are up. You've got to watch the top line, and especially if you're in a state that has or is thinking about rent control. It's part of the business. And whether you use Dion's binder strategy or other method, don't forget to raise rents. If you don't have to do it every year, I like to do it every other year until rent control came into California. Now it's every year. But yeah, it's something you have to watch.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like to do it every year, even if it's $5, just to set the expectation you will always get some increase. Because I found, like, if I don't raise it one year, the next year, the tenant's like, oh, but you didn't raise it last year. I wasn't expecting an increase this year. So just even a small amount. Okay, so my next one is on insurance. This is a big one. You really need to understand your insurance. We get a lot of times the question about, should I open an LLC, right? And there's a lot of properties. Majority of investors don't have theirs in LLCs for various reasons. They're just starting out. They have one property. The franchise tax is going to be too much on that, for like foreign qualifications and stuff like that. But you really need to understand what your insurance covers. And when you move to a landlord insurance policy, you need to understand, does this, I mean, yeah, it's hurricane, but does it also have flooding insurance involved? Like, that's a big one. What about if the tenant slips and falls? That's another one. And then the question I always like to ask the insurance provider is, so what are you not covering? Because if you know what that risk is, then you can kind of set yourself up of what is not covered by them, where, shoot, I wish I had an LLC because they're taking money from my assets elsewhere.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. The next one I'll give you is landlords not having a reserve, right? Again, if you're doing this right, you should be banking reserves every month, because again, capital improvements, vacancies, evictions, they don't all happen at once, but you should reserve for them. And I've known some landlords that run really close to the bone, and they're living off the cash flow, and then a water heater, an eviction, a sudden vacancy happens, and they don't have the cash flow, and they're scrambling. And then they make it worse by doing band-aids versus true repairs. And if you're going to be a landlord, one of the things you have to do is you have to have reserves. And it's funny how many times things happen in threes, right? I got this, I got that, I got this, and you've got to have the reserves. you know, you don't have to keep reserving forever. If you have a big portfolio, you can just have a number, but definitely have reserves, because if you don't, you're going to get got eventually.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then my final one that I have is just related to the maintenance and repair of the
Mhm.
property and with tenant requests. Tenant landlord law, you can get yourself into so much trouble if you're just not responding to tenants, getting things fixed. So just make sure you know the law, make sure you yourself are following your end of the contract. I've seen some landlords who will say something like, oh, well, I don't have the money for this now, so we can do it in 3 months. That's not the answer. It's like, well, this might need to be done now. It might be heat problem or whatever.
Yep.
So just make sure you're on top of all of that.
I love this. Dane, if somebody wanted to look at Hemlane's helping people in the ORaaT community all over the country, both in state, out of state. It is becoming the platform of choice for ORaaT members. Where do they go?
Yeah, you can go to Hemlane, HEMLANE.com. We do everything from helping you find and place a tenant to picking up your maintenance calls. There's everything from free starter plans to more full service. And so check it out. We'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dana. Have a great day.
Thanks so much.